Jacob was just 8 years old when his sister said something she would regret for the rest of her life. She didn't mean to hurt him, but the damage was done. Their family was falling apart, hope was fading. And then, out of nowhere, Taylor Swift did something that no one, not even his mom, could have imagined. Jacob wasn't like most kids his age. He didn't enjoy noisy birthday parties or crowded playgrounds. What made him happiest were quiet moments. Watching ceiling fans spin, lining up his toy dinosaurs in perfect rows, or listening to the same lullaby over and over again. He was diagnosed with autism when he was 3. Since then, his world had been filled with routines, therapy sessions, and sensory tools, anything to help him feel a little safer in a world that often felt too loud, too bright, and too unpredictable. His mom, Allison, did everything she could. She read every book, joined every support group, and fought hard to make sure Jacob felt loved and accepted. But she was also tired. The kind of tired you don't talk about. The kind that settles deep in your bones. And then there was Jordan, Jacob's older sister. 13, caught between childhood and growing up. She loved her brother. She really did. But it was complicated. At school, her friends didn't understand. Some asked why Jacob flapped his hands or made strange sounds. Others just stared. Jordan would smile and shrug it off. But inside, she was exhausted. Exhausted from explaining, from defending, from always being the sister of the weird kid. And that silent frustration was about to explode in a way none of them saw coming. It happened on a Tuesday. Lunch period had just started, and the cafeteria was louder than usual. Kids laughing, chairs scraping, trays clattering. Jacob sat with his noise-canceling headphones on, eyes fixed on the peanut butter sandwich his mom had cut into perfect triangles. But then something went wrong. The fire alarm was being tested, no warning. A shrill, high-pitched ring echoed through the room. Jacob froze. His breathing quickened. His hands began to flap. And then, he screamed. A few kids jumped. Others laughed. One boy pulled out his phone and started recording. "Yo, get this, weirdo's losing it again," he whispered to his friend. Jordan was standing just a few feet away. She turned around, and when she saw her brother on the floor, covering his ears and rocking, her heart dropped. But not out of concern, out of embarrassment. She could feel eyes turning. Not just on Jacob, on her. There's the sister, the one with the freak brother. And in that moment, tired, overwhelmed, and just wanting to disappear, she snapped. She marched over, grabbed Jacob by the arm, and hissed. "Why can't you just act normal for once? You always ruin everything." Jacob looked up at her, confused. And then, he shut down. He stopped moving, stopped blinking, just stared into space. A teacher rushed over. The phone was confiscated, kids went back to eating, but nothing about that moment was normal anymore. And Jordan, she didn't say another word for the rest of the day. That night, the house was quieter than usual. Jacob didn't ask for his bedtime lullaby. He just lay in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. And Jordan, she couldn't even bring herself to say goodnight. Meanwhile, their mom was still trying. The service dog they'd been fundraising for, Jacob's one real shot at feeling safe in the world, was still out of reach. $10,000 was the goal. After 3 months, they had barely raised $2,100. One night, after Jacob had gone to bed, Jordan overheard her mom on the phone. Her voice was shaking. "I don't know what else to do. He needs this dog. I don't know who to ask anymore." That night, Jordan did something she hadn't done in a while. She sat next to Jacob's bed. He didn't speak. He just turned his head slightly toward her. And that hurt the most. She whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I was just scared." He didn't say anything back. But the next morning, something unbelievable happened. The morning started like any other. Cereal, quiet, a heavy silence that had lingered for days. But then, Allison's phone buzzed. At first, she thought it was spam. An email with a subject line that made her freeze. Taylor Swift would like to help. She opened it, hands trembling. It was real. It was from someone on Taylor Swift's team. They had seen Jacob's story. Not just the fundraiser, but the video. The meltdown, the sister's reaction, the pain in that family's silence. Taylor wanted to help, and not just with kind words. That afternoon, Allison received a $10,000 donation, anonymous, but confirmed. The service dog was now fully funded. But that wasn't all. 2 days later, the phone rang again. This time, it was a direct invitation. Taylor is performing in Houston this weekend. She'd like your entire family to attend. Front row seats, and backstage passes included. Jordan stared at her mom in disbelief. She thought it was a joke. But her mom just nodded through tears. On the day of the concert, the family drove in near silence. Jacob had his headphones, Jordan had a lump in her throat. She didn't know what was waiting behind those stadium doors. After the show, they were led backstage, through a quiet hallway. Jacob was holding his sister's hand, something he rarely did. He was overwhelmed, but calm. He had one thing on his mind: Taylor Swift. When she finally walked into the room, it was like the entire world paused. She wasn't surrounded by cameras or flashing lights. No security pushing people aside. She just walked in slowly, softly, gently. Jacob froze. He didn't scream, he didn't flap. He just looked up at her, with wide wondering eyes. Taylor knelt down to his level. She smiled and said, "Hi Jacob. Thank you for coming. I know it can be really loud in there, but I'm so glad you made it." Jacob stared at her for a second, and then, he reached out, and grabbed her face gently. His way of connecting. And then, he said it. The words his family had practiced with him all week. The sentence they weren't sure he'd ever be able to say in the moment. He whispered, "Hi Taylor." His mom burst into tears. Jordan gasped. Even Taylor's eyes began to well up. She leaned in and gave Jacob the softest hug, whispering, "You did so good." But then, Taylor turned to Jordan. And in a moment that caught everyone off guard, she looked her right in the eyes, and said, "He's lucky to have a sister like you." Jordan froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The words hit harder than anything she expected. She wanted to speak, to explain, to confess what she'd said, what she'd done, but all she could do was cry. Jacob got his service dog a few weeks later. A golden retriever named Reed. Gentle, calm, always by his side. Taylor Swift didn't just help a boy with autism, she helped a sister find her way back to him. And sometimes, that's the kind of love the world forgets to talk about.